he jumps in the community asking, hey, is this normal? And he got 20 different founders jump in and be like, oh, I dealt with this a couple years ago.
Yep.
Here's like a lawyer you can talk to. This is what my experience was. You know, some guys are like, yeah, you should just drive down and like basically talk to him. Bunch of people were like, you know what, like happy if you want to make a stink about this on social media, happy to reshare.
Oh, dude, I love that. Everyone's like,
yeah,
I'll hop in there, I'll comment, I'll repost.
Oh yeah, dude. You know, yeah, people like there was like 20 people rallying around this guy, and like even at the end of the thread, he was just like, dude, I've never got this level of support from like other people before. You know, it's just like I don't feel like I'm alone.
From amp.io, it's How I DTC'd This, a show about the legends of e-commerce, the founders, marketers, agencies, and tech platforms on how they pulled it off and how you can too. Ben, Sam, thank you for joining me on here. Excited to chat with y'all.
What's up, Matt?
What's up, dude? How's it going?
Good to see you guys.
Likewise.
Yeah, no, it was awesome hanging with you in San Diego. Great getting to know you a little bit better, and excited to kind of share these founder stories with the world, and then also get into some kind of good lessons learned. You know, I've got a whole host of businesses, so yeah, excited to chat with you all about it.
Cool. Likewise. That was a pretty fun event with Commerce Roundtable. It's great, great meeting everyone.
I feel like those events are like hit or miss sometimes, but I feel like that was like one of the better ones that I've been to for sure.
Yeah,
there's like super intimate vibes, good content. So super stoked. Hope that it happens again next year, especially because it's like 20 minutes away from us too.
Ben, do you want to kick off our founding story?
Where should we start? So Sam and I own a few businesses together. We started our main business and platform kind of launching point with a clothing brand for women, more mature women are the demographics. We started off as actually that business was started by our parents back in 1998. And really the only thing that we kept was the name. About 2008, there was the recession, and it was just kind of a side hustle. This is Sivana, yeah. This was there was a recession, and we were, my parents were doing like, maybe 5 orders a week. And we just always thought it was like a really cool name. Sam and I grew up in a house that like practiced yoga, meditation, and the company started off with shirts that were printed with the Om symbol. I don't know if you've seen it. It's like the Sanskrit word for it's basically it means the cosmic vibration of the universe. And so the original mission was to print 1 million of those shirts, and distribute them throughout the world, because it just carried such a powerful message. To one of the holiest symbols, especially for, in Hinduism. But by 2008 or so, my dad's always been a entrepreneur, owned a few businesses. The main one was silk screening and embroidery. My mom was a seamstress, and she made dresses for like First Lady. I don't know which one, but she was like, she was just really good with clothing.
That's her claim to fame. She brings
We don't actually know who it is though, but
she brings that up every once in a while.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
But we had basically a background in clothing. There was always like a sewing machine around. And so anyway, through this side hustle, it was about 2008. Things started dwindling down. My parents were semi-retired at that point, and the business just kind of fizzled off. Fast forward to about 2010. I was living in New York City. Sam was here in Encinitas. And we were just kind of thinking about like, what can we do? I was working in the ad industry over there. Sam was doing different jobs around town here. And we were trying to figure out what we could do together.
Nice.
And so we kind of decided to kind of kickstart the family business again. So basically we had a list of, I think about maybe 200 people on the mailing list. And Sam and I were just like, oh, let's start a yoga clothing brand, because it's kind of what we knew. We were in like Encinitas, which is like a mecca of yoga studios. There's I think, more yoga studios than Starbucks, which is fascinating. But we started that off in 2011, launched on Shopify. We're store number 300 exactly.
Nice.
Shopify wasn't what it is today back then, definitely. But we launched that and found pretty quickly that we had a lot of competition in the yoga apparel space. So we kind of had to figure out what to do next. We bought a bunch of inventory. One of our first vendors was actually Aloe back when they just did wholesale. They weren't even Aloe as they are today.
This was back when they only did printed shirts too.
Yeah, they sold blanks.
Yeah, that was like
they sold blanks. Starting. So like, since we were kind of like in the silkscreen embroidery world, they were like a Bella canvas type of business. So we thought, okay, cool, we could buy that and just like, put our label on it and call it a day. But didn't work out too well. We ended up having to like, Sam, do you remember what exactly happened there? That was like, we were trying to like figure out how we can like get more people in the door. So we started working with a company that sells yoga mats, and we found this brand that like was pretty well known at the time. I think they are still pretty well known. But they were up in like maybe an hour away from us, I think in Costa Mesa at the time. And we worked out a deal with them where, we would basically sell their mats at almost break even for us, which was cheaper than anywhere else you could find them, including Amazon. And that would kind of like get them in the door. We're kind of looking at like our loss leaders without really realizing that that's what it was called.
Yeah.
Right.
Our original thesis was to take we had some inventory left over from when our parents had been running the company and kind of let it fizzle out. So the original intent was to relaunch the site and then just sell out the inventory. I think, Ben, wasn't our plan originally just pocket the money and be done with it? And then it like kept on going. Cause I think that's when you discovered Facebook ads, which at the time was literally just a platform where you buy likes and like you'd post organically, which was like,
That's amazing.
I don't think a lot of people that are in Facebook ads were ever at that
That's what we were
stage.
doing actually. That's how we started. We were doing like giveaways with those yoga mats. We do giveaways and then we would sell them for whatever it cost us. Basically, I guess that vendor, they were selling to Amazon directly. And they got contacted by Amazon, or one of the biggest sellers on, that were selling their product, and said they like figured out that we were doing this, and they said that they have to stop us because I guess we weren't, going by the laws of MSRP, which, we didn't really know anything about. So we're like, okay, well, we can't sell them at that price, especially shipping was like, a huge pain, shipping like a 3-foot long heavy yoga mat. So we started like bringing on jewelry. We found some different like small artisans that were selling like this like Tibetan Nepalese jewelry. And we started listing that and seeing if that would sell. And it started selling well. And around that time, we were doing giveaways on Facebook, and Facebook launched the Power Editor, where you could like bulk create ads. And it was clunky. It didn't quite load right, but no one else was really using it at the time. So I kind of just jumped in and started like, dabbling. One of my first experiences was I think I was setting like a daily budget or a weekly budget or something like that, of like, it must have been a weekly, because it was like such a small amount at the time, but felt like a lot. It was like $1,000 for a week to spend on ads. And I didn't check the right box, and I ended up spending that at like 1:30 a.m. in the morning in like a span of like 7 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what? It was just gone,
Yeah. When you're that's like the first mistake I feel like everyone makes when they're doing like building their brand. They like adding that extra zero to Facebook or whatever, especially when you're small.
Yeah. So that was like, I was like, oh shit, did that just really happen? And it was like kind of embarrassing also, because it was like such a like after looking at it again, there was like just a clear checkbox that I was like, oh shit, like, yeah. But it was a good lesson, you know? And I think that like, that was probably the best lesson that I've gotten from Facebook. And it's just like, you know, I still got back into it and still kind of started dabbling, much lower budgets. And we had this yak bone bracelet thing that for whatever reason, just took off on Facebook. It was like people could not get enough of this thing. I didn't quite understand it because like it's not something that I thought was super visually appealing. It just kind of had a cool story. It was like handmade in these like little villages and stuff. And so this stuff took off, and we were actually like turning off ads when we got like a 7x ROAS, you know? It was like we were like doing like 20, like put in $1, take 20 out. But at the time it was like we ran into inventory issues really fast. So we were like, okay, we gotta start like bringing in more products because
that was when you were like, all right, this is working. Like we got to keep doing this.
Oh yeah. We thought that we were like, we could retire. Like we were like, oh man, this is so easy, you know?
There's been a lot of those moments over the years.
Oh yeah. I feel like that's just part of the journey, right? Yeah. You're like, I'm a genius. I can't believe I just figured this out, you know? Yeah. Huge unlock. And then all of a sudden it's like, and the next day it's like, just doesn't work at all. And you're like, what? That was like, that was actually the problem. We'd buy a bunch of inventory for it. And then we would turn the Facebook ad back on thinking we'd get the same results and it wouldn't be there. And we're like, great. Now we have all this inventory. But we were just kind of like, okay, well, what else could we bring on, you know, to kind of diversify? So we kept bringing in different pieces of jewelry from just different like smaller artisans around the world. And then we kept running into these inventory constraints where it's like, you know, we're working with small vendors. They can only move so quickly. They're not used to the volume that Facebook allows for. And so this went on for like, you know, it felt like, you know, cat and mouse for like 5 years. But at the time it was like, you know, we were starting to like move the budget up. I was managing the budget for the most part. And we were still scaling, you know, we were scaling horizontally and stuff. We got our first office. Actually where the business started was a house that all of our family members lived in, plus like probably 70% of our close friend group. So we were all like rotating inside of and out of this house.
At some point, not at the same time.
Not at the same time, right? Yeah. It was just like, it just happened like, you know, like my parents were there and then they moved and then a friend moved in and then, you know, Sam moved in and that type of thing. But at the same time, like we were fulfilling out of our garage. And we were just doing our own fulfillment because we didn't even know what a 3PL was. We were just like, okay, let's just, it felt like a online garage sale sometimes, you know? And we were just fulfilling all of our orders and stuff. But anyway, finally, like by 2015, we moved into our first office, which was exciting. And you know, it was just like the biggest office we've ever had. Actually, we hadn't had an office yet. But we were, you know, we had big plans. We thought that this would stay like this forever. And we moved into the office and it was basically just like flatlined. And so we had to kind of pivot and start thinking of like ways that we can, you know, increase the revenue and kind of keep up. And Facebook was doing all these changes and at the time, I think we were maybe
a lot of it was also our inexperience of just like not having ever owned a company. I don't like to think about it too much, but I kind of think about it like kind of like buying Bitcoin now. It's just like we didn't know we didn't know. And looking back now, like actively turning down budgets when you're getting a 5 ROAS and you're like, oh, how could I possibly build a company on a 5 ROAS? It's like impossible because you're used to a 10 and you're like, oh, that's right. 10's expected. And so like you get into this trap of like jumping from agency to agency, trying to get basically better results because you know, you see one brand crushing it. And it was a lot of just basically going in circles, chasing our tail. One, because we just didn't know what we really should have to basically been able to take advantage of the moment. But also, so it was a lot of that basically for I'd say we didn't think of 3 years.
We definitely were more like we were just selling stuff online. We weren't thinking about like, are we a brand or like really kind of future plans. We weren't really thinking about like, who is our customer. We're like, oh, this sells through Facebook, so let's just keep buying more of it and keep selling it. We were collecting emails and stuff the whole time. And we went through the phase that I think a lot of entrepreneurs can kind of relate to, is like, thinking that there's like an app or something that will fix everything. That you're just like, man, the Shopify app store, there's so much there. Let's just add everything,
Yeah.
And then there's like, software companies that are like, yeah, if you just add this, and we're going to triple your ROAS or whatever, we're like, oh, sweet, let's add it, So there was a lot of that. It was kind of like, we felt just like kind of pulled in a bunch of directions and really not knowing like which direction we should go in. Like for the longest time, we were like, who are we actually selling to, and kind of like, by that point, Sam and I were just talking about like, maybe we should just, we had built this customer that was buying like clothing from us. And at that point we had a pretty wide range of clothing, that we were kind of going like shallow on inventory, but like wide on like assortment. And it made it very difficult to plan for inventory, because you never know, especially with fashion. It's like, is this going to be something that people want, and what happens if they don't want it? What do we do with it? So we were always kind of like, just buying the bare minimum just to see if it'll work, and over time we realized that we were essentially building like two customer bases: people that bought our jewelry and like our gift items, and people that bought clothing. And there was some crossover, but it wasn't very big. So it made it difficult, especially as Facebook was changing, like how do we actually message to these people? And we were starting to think about that. How do we bring in new people? And there's more competition. Facebook was getting easier to run. It was kind of like the golden era of Facebook ads, around 2016, where it was like more sophisticated, where it's like wasn't, it was past the power editor phase, I believe. And it was just attracting a lot of new brands. So it was getting more competitive, but also still seeing like amazing results. So around 2018, we decided to launch, we decided to take our main piece of jewelry that we were selling at the time, which was this like 4mm gemstone bracelet in maybe like 50 different gemstones, and break that out into its own brand, so that we could just at least market that to people that like crystal bracelets. And yeah, Sam kind of head up the initial like start of that brand. So Sam, you want to talk about how we did that?
So we kind of got to a point where with our main brand Sivana, we got to a point where kind of it wasn't necessarily plateaued anymore, as we were starting to basically kind of get a little bit more sophisticated with what we were doing. But one of the challenges is, one, the way that we kind of divvied up the responsibilities of the company was Ben was in charge of marketing and most of the direction of that particular brand, Sivana. I was running mainly operations, customer support, all that stuff, which if you don't have something that's scaling like crazy, operations gets fairly redundant, not redundant, but like repetitive. So it got to a point where I had a little bit of excess free time. And then like Ben said, he was analyzing all of our sales and realized, we have this one product accounting for 20% of all of our sales, and we can't really run ads on it because, again, it's going to a company where like, are we a jewelry brand? Are we a clothing brand? So I got tasked with kind of the trying to pull that product out and turn it into a new like entity in and of itself. So the way that we did that was we decided that we were going to take $20,000 of seed money from the main brand, put into its own bank account, separate out the P&L and everything. And then basically if it worked and the bank account would continue to grow, we'd keep going. If it ran out, we'd just shut it down. So what we did was we didn't even actually buy new inventory. We took that exact same inventory, was actually branded to Sivana, and we literally just synced it using Ship Hero to our new Shopify store, which we called Tiny Rituals. Again, the quick story on the brand name Tiny Rituals, I feel like it's very common for people to overthink brand names, where like, they spend so much time just like analyzing for hours trying to figure out like the perfect name that to sound good. And I feel like everyone's gone through this stage of like everything sounds stupid. So that was kind of one of the things that were like our first test with Tiny Rituals was when we just came up with a name like, hey, they're tiny bracelets, cool, tiny. And then we thought of like, what's a generic yoga word? Rituals. Okay, cool, Tiny Rituals, go. It's like, and then we're like, oh, is tinyrituals.com available? No. All right, tinyrituals.co, it's available, cool. And then we're like, Tiny Rituals, Googled it. Is there anyone selling something comparable? No. It's like a company selling like, I think, pencils, which is super random. But anyway, so we decided, we're like, all right, cool. No one's like, there's no trademark, there's no nothing. So let's just go for it and see what happens. It's kind of interesting seeing names evolve into a brand, because you're like, initially it's like, you repeat that name, it sounds so stupid to you over and over and over again. And then over time, it's just like, it kind of develops basically a personality of itself into itself, which I'm pretty sure everyone has experienced at some point, like, especially when they launch thinking that their brand name is stupid. And then it kind of embodies the persona. But anyway, so we pulled out that product. We literally, all we did was we synced a new Shopify store to our existing Ship Hero inventory. So we literally, it was like essentially a drop ship store from our own inventory. So we put it up online. If an order came in, it wired to our warehouse management system, and then we shipped it out. And we didn't even custom brand it. It was just like sending out Sivana package, just like normal. Then we got that launched, and obviously the rest is history in terms of we never had to shut down the bank account. So things just kept on growing.
That one scaled really hard in 2020 when basically, the pandemic happened. People like, the crystal market just took off, and people just wanted to have crystals for their homes and stuff. I think it was the first time that it overtook semi-precious gemstones, overtook like diamonds and that industry basically, as far as like search. And we have a really like kick-ass SEO guy that is a close friend of ours, that he actually pretty much got Tiny Rituals to like 1.2 million visitors a month just on organic SEO. I think it was a combination of just like good strategy on SEO, but also that there was just a rise in demand for crystals. And so
funny story with that one though, before we keep going, is the way that we launched with SEO is because it was our new brand, and our buddy had been working with us for a while and he wanted to learn SEO. We basically told him like, hey, we're going to pay you basically very little, you know what I mean, to get started, because obviously you don't know what you're doing. But this is also a brand we don't care about, in the sense of like, it's our playground. So we're like, hey, go for it. Do whatever you want. We'll cover some of the costs, like writers and backlink building, but like, go do your thing. So he went and bought a course online, like joined one of those SEO groups, started learning, and like literally now I would recommend him to pretty much anyone. You met him as Matt at dinner.
Great guy.
Yeah.
So that brand took off. Yeah, that brand took off organically, and it kind of made all other efforts pretty easy. It's like when your rankings are higher, Google likes to see that. We had cheaper advertising on Google. It was easier to make sales on Facebook, and it just kind of like has a life of its own now. So that's like our crystal brand. And then Sam, do you want to talk about Sozy?
Yeah, for sure. On the last thing to note on the Tiny Rituals story, I feel like we also we sell these things called worry stones. They're literally for like you hold in your hand and kind of like basically rub it between your fingers.
It's like an opposite fidget spinner thing.
I think what we didn't realize is we basically had like elevated fidget spinner, which especially when COVID hit, when everyone was super stressed out, we saw the sales of that particular product go through the roof, because I think people just want something to hold in their hands. And I think it is the same like general psychology of a fidget spinner. But that was one of our first winning products on that particular brand.
What's interesting about that? And also with some of the products for Sivana is that we're not really our target demo. So like we had these products that we're selling and we're like, why? Like why are they selling so much? Like what's going on? So Sam and I had to like really kind of get in the minds of our customers and see like, what is it about this that you love so much, And that's kind of where we got to, after reading reviews and stuff, that's how we got to it. Is like, okay, this stone that people like, it's basically just like a tiny little like oval shaped stone with a little indentation in it. And you basically just go like this, and we're like, oh, they're using this. Like, kids are using fidget spinners, it's basically like relaxing their anxiety. And that's kind of like, I feel like a theme throughout like most of our entrepreneurial journey is like kind of playing catch up to like what is actually working,
Yeah.
you know, and like why it's working.
Yeah.
You know, we're not women, you know, we're selling women's clothing. So we have to figure out why are they buying this clothing over something else, you know, and there's products where we're just like, I hate that product. I wouldn't want that product ever, you know, but people buy it and you have to figure out like, you know, why. And I remember there was an episode of Shark Tank that I was watching, and I think it was like some like watch brand, or I think, and they were trying to like market it in a certain way, but they had a different customer. And Damon John was just like, why are you not following that customer? And they were just like, they were trying to be the cool brand. And he would told them that basically, like, if they go down that path, they like are forcing, you know, they're forcing their product on a customer that might not be, you know, the right customer for them. They'll just die, you know? So it kind of teaches you to be like a little bit more humble with, you know, there's so many different types of people in the world. They have so many different unique problems that you can't understand. No one can really understand, you know? You might tap into a new market that you know nothing about. And I think that's kind of cool, is like, you know, you get to kind of learn about that. Like, why are people buying certain things over others? You know, you might buy the thing, you might invest your capital into a product that you think will work, and then everyone buys the product that you had the least faith in, you know, and you're just like, well, great. It makes you question everything.
I feel like also because we move so fast and unintelligently, especially in the early stages of really before we kind of like would actually stop. I mean, I think it's also, I blame like age too, as like just basically like no technical like finance or business background, just kind of learning as we go. Plus the fact being young at the time, where we kind of squandered the early cheap days of Facebook to the extent that we could have. But it's interesting, like we launched everything without really thinking too much. We just kind of go. And it's kind of always been interesting coming back, especially now more in the past. I feel like Ben would agree that in the past year or 2 years, we've become a little more sophisticated and kind of understanding of what we're even doing. But looking back on, like, we were moving faster than we were thinking oftentimes. And then we were like playing catch up as to like, wait, why is this? Yeah, exactly. Why is this even working? Or like not going in a direction and realizing why did for those years did we hit a wall over and over and over again? When we're looking back then, we're like, oh yeah, it's because we were basically doing the same thing as he said in Shark Tank, of like going in a direction that like, that's not where our customers were going. You know what I mean? We weren't like following the path of least resistance. We were trying to impose our will or our vision on the brand versus following what was working, you know?
And going back to what Sam was saying about like brand names, how it takes them it takes a personality of its own, you know, and you just kind of have to just like service that and just let it do its thing, let it find the customers and just figure out who that is and just do more of that, you know. But I wanted to touch on I think a lot of the ways that Sam and I operate are these like kind of learned by doing, you know. And I think that's because, well, one reason potentially is that we grew up homeschooled. We basically had like a very unorthodox childhood where we basically, like, by second grade, Sam and I are 4 years apart. So when I was in second grade, I just refused to go to school. I just hated it. I don't know why. My parents were just like, okay, we'll just try homeschooling. And so I was like, you know, second grade age. I don't know exactly what that is. Sam's about 3 to 4 years younger than me. And so my parents just homeschooled all of us, put us on a Korean math program. That was the only real schoolwork that was required, so that we had to do every day. And then everything else was kind of like, just explore, just go and like figure out what you're into, you know, which is really cool. I got like really into computers and like web development and that type of stuff. But it was a lot of just like, you know, exploring and just figuring out, you know, what worked for us, you know? So I think that definitely trails into like how we look at our businesses also.
Yeah.
So
figuring out who that
anyway.
customer is. Yeah. I mean, you guys are just like confidently just recognizing these patterns and then just improving on it. I mean, it's fascinating.
Yeah. So, so then Sam and his wife launched another brand that was kind of another clothing brand that was more geared towards the younger demographic. We noticed that like the nice thing about having 3 brands is that we can see kind of how each one moves throughout the year. And like, you know, when Facebook is not good, it's interesting how it affects all the brands. It's not just like one brand is just tanking on Facebook, the other ones are doing great. It's like usually we noticed there was like this ebb and flow, you know, throughout the year. And that's been more and more apparent lately, especially since Workspace 6 was started, where there's like, you know, a giant Slack group of founders that talk about what's working on Facebook. And it seems like whenever, you know, CPMs go up, it goes up for everybody, you know. And we also realize that business is very simple when you look at it, you know. There's we're all essentially in the same business, just different products, you know. So we all have the exact same struggles in e-commerce, you know. We're all beholden to Facebook for the most part, right? For our success. Or Amazon, right? We know nothing about Amazon though. We're not on Amazon yet. We're about to be, but yeah, so like business is pretty simple, right? You have to be solving a customer's problem somehow, you know? And if your product doesn't directly do that, I mean, every product does, right? Everyone buys for a certain problem they're trying to solve. It's your job to figure out what is that problem, you know? So like for clothing, it's like, why do people buy clothing? You know, what problem are we specifically solving that other brands aren't solving, you know? And that's where like the messaging is so important, because you can actually tell people what their problem is. And then you say, oh, well, we solve that, you know, even if it's like so. And I think that like what's really interesting about Sozy is that it's such a easy thing to kind of solve for in a way where, you know, Sozy is a combination of soft and cozy. So you can say like, oh, we sell soft and cozy clothing for women. It's like, who doesn't want soft and cozy, right?
It's funny actually with Sozy. So we originally launched it as an underwear brand, and do you remember that, Ben?
Yeah,
like originally underwear. So like the whole
Everyone
plan
hated
was
it.
like underwear. Like my wife was like, she developed she went this whole process developing this like product. She's like the perfect product, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And
she was the customer for it and everything, right?
For it, the whole like shebang of like, oh, build for yourself, whatever.
Yeah.
She created this product.
Solve your own problem.
It came in. She's like, I love this. It's amazing. And she's like, we ordered a couple thousand, launched the brand, and like literally it was basically a perfect line of 50% of people loved it and 50% of people hated it and like just despised the product. But then the true problem was that the AOV on underwear is so like low, especially on first purchase, that we're like, this is never going to work. So like immediately my wife was like, how do I like, let's buy some dresses. Let's do something. So like she launched basically a bunch of other clothing, and then that kind of took off for us and developed into what that brand is today. But it's funny that like, yeah, it's funny. Just basically we had no idea what the brand was actually going to be. And even to this day, I think we're still learning what people are actually gravitating towards. I would be curious to know, Matt, from your perspective, basically the Amped, do you actually see like there's basically a massive like not overlap in product, but in terms of brands that you work with, they're pretty much all structured the same, right? Like fundamentally.
You mean like how the business works, like how there's
what we found with basically Workspace 6 is just it's so interesting to watch, where like one company selling t-shirts, another company is selling, you know, bracelets or whatever it might be, and basically on the back end of everything that they built, it's like welcome flow, post-purchase flow.
Yeah.
And everything is pretty much structured very similar. And it's funny that the massive disparity can come between these companies, where like one might be doing 100 million and others doing like 2-3 million. And it's interesting, especially because like with me and Ben, our experiences with our three brands, some basically doing better during different times of year. There's different messaging. So one brand will basically pull ahead of the others, or vice versa, seeing in a community. It's just interesting to see that like e-commerce as a template is very standard across the board, but yet basically the positioning of that within there, like of whether that be the product or the creative, is oftentimes what basically decides how far that brand actually goes. Do you see that a lot with your clients?
Yeah, and that was one thing I was picking up as you guys were kind of saying, hey, when we were not doing millions and millions of revenue, felt like you were just kind of selling products. And then you know, I've seen the brands, we do stuff together, and I've seen more of the focus on the brand. So it's like, it's Tiny Rituals, it's Sivana, it's Sozy. It's not just like some faceless product. So I think that's one thing that I see for the brands that are, doing millions and millions of visitors a month, which is a metric that we obviously have very close access to. It's like, it's brand. I think it's a lot about the brand. And like you guys said it. I mean, it's getting easier for people to sell products. I think it's like, how do you create this brand that somebody can rally around? I mean, I haven't built an e-commerce brand. I just get to see the back end of hundreds of them. So, but yeah, I mean, they're running a Shopify store. They have a homepage. They get traffic in a certain number of ways. They buy ads here and there. Maybe they have an influencer, which is a huge help, but good products and the brand. I think those are the things that I see that move the needle. And I try to apply that with Amped. It's like, we feel like we have a phenomenal product, but also the brand. Like, the brand can't suck. Like, I was looking for this name for so long, and then I landed on it. I was like, Amped. I was like, yes, let's go. Like, I'm freaking amped. Like, I love that.
Freaking amped.
When did you decide to turn on, like, basically in the like launch basically Amped? How long ago was that?
We've only been selling Amped for like a year and a half. It was really just a development of a bunch of different businesses. I know we got into it for a long story over drinks, but man, it was, I've been making pop-ups for almost 8 years now. And, then we worked with some big brands, and I had created this technology that turned into just garbage because we customized it, worked with big brands. And then it was like, all right, after doing this so many times, we got to throw out all of it and start fresh. So Amped is just a total new product, taking all the lessons learned.
It's interesting that you've been doing pop-ups for so long. And I remember, like, when I was first, like, making this decision to add a pop-up to my store, I was like, hell no. Pop-ups are annoying. They're ugly. They're just, I just don't want to have anything to do with them, And, my background when I was in New York, I was working as a UI UX designer. So, like, doing a lot of like mobile apps and stuff. So I was really like concerned about the way things looked from like my perspective. I wanted to make sure that, like, grid systems were set up correctly and all the shit that people really don't notice or don't really even care about, but I had to basically just decide, like, okay, do I want to make money or do I want to, like, look cool, and I think, like, some brands do that well, both of them well. I couldn't figure it out. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go with, like, making money, over looking cool, and so, yeah, it was funny because my relationship with pop-ups was just like, hated them for the longest time and then just completely embraced them. And it just, like, game changer, obviously, It's
one of the few tools that, like, I feel like out there, you're like, I actually do need this. I was actually talking to someone just today who was like, ugh, pop-ups, like, they're so, like, such a bad user experience. And I was like, okay, I mean, how do you get emails then? Like, it's like, you're basically saying I don't want to have an email or SMS program. Like, like, it's a very low lift thing to basically create a pretty massive impact. We have a buddy of ours who's still like, oh, SMS is annoying. Like, I won't do SMS marketing. I'm like, and he targets, like, young people too. It's like, are his customers like 18 to 22, basically?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I think because people do it people do it poorly. Like, I mean, when you think of a pop-up, you don't think about the stuff that we're making, like the stuff that's on your site, like, you're doing like persona identification through a mini quiz, all this stuff. Like, people think of a pop-up as a white square. Like, that's when you say pop-up. People, it's like, make it more of an experience, get the UX right, make it look good. So I think it's just like most suck. And that's like why I think the Amped is doing well right now, is just because it's like, wait a minute, this thing doesn't suck. Like, oh, okay, I'm gonna try this. It's like, oh, it works really well.
Do you guys have any fun plans for any new, basically, like, any thoughts on different software, not software, but like different features that you guys are thinking of rolling out that you can tease to us right
now? There's like short-term, long-term. I think short-term, there are a lot of things around how you are creating these things. And some of this stuff you kind of, like, if you want to go in there and change things, like, there's some clicks, and it works more like Figma. You guys have seen it, but AI, obviously, not to be cliche, but if you can tell it to do things in plain text and make those happen, that is going to be absolute game changer. So working on some of that stuff, just getting more data in there. But, I think the quiz stuff we're doing is super relevant. And then longer term, there's some, like, larger things, but I think right now that's like what's right in front of us.
That's one of the things that basically I'm the most excited about using AMP for, is that actually testing messaging in the front end of the site. Because oftentimes, like, the biggest places that you kind of pick up automated feedback is pretty much like if you have a post-purchase survey that you send out, so that you have that, you have like email surveys that you send out after purchase. That's often like a pretty common one with like type forms, something like that. And then you have like no commerce post-purchase surveys. But it's always at the tail end, so you don't really pick up a massive amount of data. But it's interesting to basically being able to pull that survey forward into the front end of the actual experience when through the pop-up. That to me is pretty exciting, because it's kind of a first indicator that you can front load and get a shit ton of impressions on to pick up what kind of messaging is working the best. You know what I mean? I'm excited to go more into depth on that with basically surveys of like just in general testing messaging, because like we with Sozy more recently we found out and I was telling you that in person, it's like our biggest like value prop. Like we're a very sustainable, like give back brand. We basically found out that pretty much like what we were valuing as our third most valuable value prop, which is USA made, was essentially the one everyone actually cares about, versus the one that we've been promoting in all of our ads, which is basically like supporting survivors as well as like kind of give back programs in general. Not at all. It was like it was like basically on the bottom in terms of people's priority. So it's like, and just finding that out, we've already brought that messaging forward into all of our ads, changing up copy on our site, all that stuff, just because like it's obviously an indicator that and it's something that there's no way for us to really test that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
at scale.
I think the one thing that I've learned through the past 10 years is like how important simplicity is. There's just so many things, and it has just gotten more and more apparent over the past few years as Sam and I launch more and more businesses. So we also own and operate a fulfillment business that basically we went through, we built from the ground up, essentially just doing this ourselves. We launched last year. It's called Boxfort. In running multiple businesses, you really have to make sure that your time's spent on the things that really matter and just forget about everything else. So like, the past 2 years or so, really just focusing on like limited apps, limited software, just, one thing that I think Taylor Holiday said in a podcast, I'm not sure when, but basically said, he was like, it's not hard to do, buy something online. And I just keep thinking about that. And I keep thinking about like, yeah, I mean, if you want something online, you'll figure out a way to buy it. There's no app that's going to like, push you farther down that path, right? I think there's definitely like a use case for like, CRO and stuff, but simplicity should be, the goal. So really like looking at the tech stack, and Sam and I have been just like, just removing things that don't matter, and it comes down to like, how are you acquiring new leads, Amped. So, how excited I was when I found Amped, right? Yeah. And so like, it was just like one of the simplest products, it focuses on just that. And that's all I need, and then, email, SMS, and your Shopify store, and ads. That's pretty much it, right? But also looking at the businesses as like from a higher level too. Sam and I have been like in the weeds for so long, but now like having multiple businesses, you kind of have to just like separate yourself. And I kind of wish that we did that sooner, because it's like, you realize that when you have good people in place, give them autonomy to make decisions and move the business forward on your behalf, essentially. And you can focus on like the higher level stuff. So like, earlier this year, I actually took Facebook ads back under my control, because for the longest time we were working with agencies and freelancers, and we had been working with them for like 5 years or so, just different agencies and stuff. And we realized like that's one of the highest growth levers that we have. It's something that I learned early on how to use it. And then I passed it off because I felt like there were other areas of the businesses that needed my attention. If I could go back in time, I probably wouldn't have done that because that was what was moving the needle, So focusing on like what is like my unique strength is like I can make ads, I can edit videos, I can do all that stuff pretty easily. So when that's such an important part of the business, why would I not be focusing on that? You know, eventually I'll let it go, I'm sure. But really looking at like, you know, your business metrics from a higher level also, you know, it doesn't matter today if you're losing money on a customer, you know, as long as like over time you're making money on the customer. For the longest time, we were looking at like, you know, oh, revenue's down today, you know, bring down the, you know, ad spend, you know, and we're looking at it like too close. But earlier in this year, we kind of changed fundamentally, Sam, wouldn't you say, like the way that we look at the businesses, where we look at it just as simple as possible. Like, you know, and our main indicator is contribution margin, which we follow every day. Yeah.
Before going on to that point, the other thing that we noticed recently is like in e-commerce, it's basically, there's a different, like, let's say if your target CAC is like, let's say obviously below 70, you're like, whatever you have. So let's say for this brand is $70. E-commerce is such a fine line on margin that basically if you're at let's say if you're at $70, you're basically plateaued. You cannot scale, you cannot grow, you cannot do anything. If you're at 75, you're losing money, like, and you're actually shrinking as a brand, and you're effectively dying slowly. At 65, you're scaling insanely fast. It's a very, very small difference of sometimes dollars per purchase. And that's one big thing, like Ben said, is like him getting basically back in the weeds of marketing and realizing like with that extra attention and focus and just focusing on the simple, like the simplicity of like fundamentally creative product, all that stuff, and focusing on that, just bringing down the cost of acquisition by $5, $10 with a little bit more focused energy, especially from a founder level, can basically yield where your budgets can increase by 3x. Just by having that little efficiency, because you're able to basically spend more, that's all I think I want to add.
Yeah. But also know that like, even if you are potentially losing money for, on every first purchase, that in the long run, if you have a long enough window, you could actually be winning and not even realizing it. That's one thing that, with Sivana especially, one thing that I noticed was like, we were building a company that had loyal customers, especially over the past few years. And looking at the ads too closely and shutting off, ads when they, we didn't think that they were working because the ROAS was like 1.8, actually was bringing in like massive customers, so like now I'm just trying to look at as far of a window as possible on like, LTV. If I can spend, if I have to lose $100 to make $1,000, I'm okay with that, over, a few years. Figuring out how to get there is the challenge of like, okay, how do I finance that till I get there, which I think is it's a decent problem to have. And I can definitely see how, if you're not aware of that, you can definitely like shoot yourself in the foot. But I think that like, looking at the business from a bird's eye view is the way, for sure.
Yeah.
And the most important metrics that I believe are contribution margin on new customers and the new customer count. I don't care, like we were running our ads off of MER for the longest time, and trying to keep that at a certain level, but it really wasn't the right metric to really look at. Now we're spending more of a percentage of our revenue on ads, but we're way more profitable too.
Love it.
So
where did W6 come in? I mean, you brought that up, and just for anybody listening, I mean, an impressive community, but tell me, like, how did that get started, and how the heck did you get hundreds and hundreds of people on this thing? That must have like hit a tipping point too.
So that basically was started where effectively I forgot what actually escaped. Me and Ben have been talking about launching a community for a while. Not community, but basically just like a small Slack group. So finally at some point I just realized, I was like, you know what? Like I was this is actually one of the big game changers has been for us, is just getting in contact with more founders and talking to more founders. You wouldn't believe at how much money and time you save by talking to other founders, because it's like, you might be, if you're planning on investigating a certain software or agency, and you talk to another founder, you're like, oh yeah, that's a waste of time, or that like, like that's a bad contract or whatever. It just saves you so much in the long run. But anyway, point being is that how it launched was, I I believe I forgot which software it was, but they recently rolled out a massive update, and I got like 5 text messages from a couple friends, literally simultaneously. I was like sitting down for lunch, and I like got text message for one and the other. Everyone was like, "Hey, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about this? What are you doing?"
They were raising prices, right?
Yeah, I mean, let's just call it who it is, Klaviyo. So anyway, basically, Klaviyo just sent out an email that they're like getting rid of the discount. Everyone's like, "Well, what are you gonna do? Whatever, blah blah blah." I think it was a combination of like the iOS 17, I think, and that. So like everyone was basically figuring out like essentially the conversation was, what segment are you going to send to now? Are you tightening that like engagement window to 60 days instead of 180 days? Like everyone's figuring out how to optimize their bill. So like, one person would text me one idea, like, oh, I'm going to do that. And then I'd be talking to them, and then I'd be relaying that to another text message thread. And I was like, you know what, this is stupid. Like, let's just put everyone into one single spot. So booted up a Slack group, basically added a couple people. And I kind of was like, oh, this is fun. Like, let's see how far I can go. So I just went down my Rolodex of like everyone I thought of that I'd ever talked to as a founder, send them like a message like, hey, do you want to join? Do you want to join? Do you want to join? So we got up to like about 20 or 30 people. And then at that point, it started getting to the point where like they started being like, oh, do you mind if I add my co-founder? Do you mind if I add my friend of mine? Whatever. So quickly, kind of like it was that. And then I posted it online. I was saying like, hey, we have a founder community that I created. I post on Twitter, a Facebook group I'm part of, or the Facebook Shopify Plus group. And I got like, I think like 600 people apply in like a span of a day. And then at that point I was like, I can't just keep adding people one by one. Also, I don't know, this is gone so far past people I know personally. I was like, I need to standardize this. Like I need to actually create a way to basically monitor. And then also like, do we have rules about who can go in, who can't? And like, it's kind of starting to make me feel like a bit of a mean girl to be like, no, like you're not allowed to join. So like I asked everyone who is currently in the community, I think there's 30 people at the time, like, who do we want in here? So the determination was we wanted founders, we wanted C-level officers, VPs. So like if you're vice president of a brand, oftentimes they're running it for a larger entity. And then managing partners, or anyone who has essentially 5% equity or more. So basically anyone who's going to cry in a bathtub should this thing go to shit. That's the people we wanted. We didn't like, obviously there's people that can be very engaged in a company, but even at a level of like, you're a high level person in a company, oftentimes like you're just going to get another job, you're bound that your equity didn't work out or whatever, but it's like, it's not really something that you're just going to go to something else. Whereas founders have a certain sense of identity in what they're building. And it's literally like having your child die, you know what I mean? Not obviously like in reality, but to the financial and like professional equivalent of that.
So crying in the bathtub test. I like that.
Crying in the bathtub pretty much describes, like if you're going to be crying in the bathtub, one thing goes down the drain, that pretty much tells you exactly who it's going to be. So anyway, point is that I created a whole system for basically onboarding people. Me and my buddy Philip, we kind of decided to launch this into its kind of own entity. How we came up with the name, which I think is kind of a funny story, back to names not mattering. I had all these people coming and applying. I was like, I need to put these applications somewhere in some kind of like database. So I went to my Airtable and I clicked like create a new workspace. And because I had 5 other workspaces in Airtable, the automated name that it came up with was Workspace 6. So I was like, that sounds like a good name. And I was like, cool. I Googled like, awesome. So I like went to Domain Finder. I was like, is Workspace 6 available? I was like, .io is, all right, cool, book it. That's the name. So anyway, basically going on from there, I think we're now at about nearly 700 members confirmed. All 7-figure founders or higher. And it's a pretty engaging environment.
It's a free a Slack group of founders to join with supporting members that get some extra benefits, like discounts and stuff, right, Sam?
Yeah, we were for a brief minute we were thinking like, okay, this is producing a lot of value for people, so we're gonna basically make it a paid community. But like as I was trying to talking to people about it, I was like, this is giving me a bit of the ick. I mean, with all day long and how much founders are getting hit literally nonstop. And like now that I'm part of a community and an admin, I get like a lot of really intense personal DMs from people of like what's going on in their lives. So like just yesterday I got a DM from someone who's like both their parents passed away and their I think their partner / significant other's parent, like one of their parents passed away at the same time, all in the same month. And they have like, an 8-figure brand, and they're like, a husband and wife duo have been running this thing for forever. And, they're like, we need to get out of this. Like, we want to focus on our children. So that's the kind of like personal stuff I get DM'd from people, like asking me like, what should I do? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, like I'm not like experienced in that level. But anyway, point being is it kind of gave me like, it kind of killed the vibe of being a community by trying to turn into a paid product. So basically we transitioned it to just a supporting membership. So people who want to donate, they can. We created a bunch of resources for people that basically, if they want to have access to, obviously they can become a supporting member to access those. But beyond that, it's just a free community that people can enjoy and utilize. And hopefully it saves some people money and makes their lives easier.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's great. And it was so funny. Like, I think the only reason that I know how to do what I do right now is because other people taught me in the beginning. Like, you've got to have somebody show you. And I think that's such a huge piece. Like, I was on the way back from San Diego, I was just all fired up, coming back from that round table, man. And I was sitting next to this guy. He started a CBD brand, and he was telling me about it. And he's like, we're on like, we're on Squarespace Commerce, and they're doing this and this, but they come from like a family business where they like make all this candy. And it was just like super impressive of the scale of the business. But the online thing, I was like, oh my gosh, and what are you doing here? And what are you doing here? And it was just like, these were new things that he just hadn't been in D2C before. And just to be able to share, like, here's like the 5 most important things to do next. It was just like super, I think it was helpful for this guy. We'll see. But like, It just seemed like I wish there was somebody to just like guide me through that if I were in his shoes,
I mean, it's really like, it's a community of mentors in every way, like you might be a mentor to someone and not really even knowing it, just by like, there's so many people that just like Sam and I have been doing this for so long. We're not like, experts or mentors by any stretch of the imagination. We just know what we've had experience with. Right. So even something as little as just saying, hey, if you want to launch a store, go with Shopify, don't go with Wix. It's like, I don't know anything about Wix, but it's like everyone is on Shopify, so you should probably do that. That could just be a game changer for somebody, and you never quite know. And so like in the Slack channel, there's messages all day long, from every topic. And also like, there's a meme channel and D2C news, and we're just like kind of talking about this stuff and kind of creating these virtual bonds where, I mean, essentially like we are kind of building this into an e-commerce founder like superpower, because there are software companies that when they get to a certain scale, they start price gouging you, and with a fragmented community, it's harder to kind of, unify against that. Now I think that, this group does have the ability to it's kind of like a founders union essentially, but it keeps everyone honest, it keeps like it's just like, I don't want to like, it's not like a bad thing or anything, but like we definitely have been fragmented for so long, and this has happened multiple times to us, where the software company gets big, that, the original founder sells it, and then the founders of the smaller brands kind of get, they have to go find a new solution because of that, and so you can see like, this is definitely happening with Amped and also SendLane in the community, is that, once like there are a few people that are using it and are stoked on the product, it just spreads. I don't know if you've seen, more and more people signing up for Amped, but but I know like, when I mean, it's not, it's just, you're building a great product, and and it's just like, we start talking about it, we talk about how we're using the product and like, new features of the product and like that type of thing.
I think also the other thing too I really enjoy about the community is, one, I wish it had existed when we first started. I mean, granted, we could have probably put in more energy to go out there and try and like build our own personal network, which was not really on our radar, having never been in the kind of the professional scene for a long time. But like, if we had had the community at the time, I think that a lot of the things we would have focused on, there's just so much bad information out there. And again, back to like what Ben was saying earlier, like, you're not going to do an upsell and then change your business. You're not going to go from being a $3 million company to a $20 million company because you added a post-purchase upsell. It's never going to happen. You know what I mean? you're never going to change a button color on your add to cart button and you're suddenly going to be able to scale. So it's like realizing that, and the problem is that the way this entire industry is built is effectively there's a lot of providers that are incentivized massively to basically elude that they basically are the silver bullet that can help businesses, because obviously for a variety of other reasons. But point being is that like at a certain scale, there's just simply things that you should not be doing or wasting your time on. Like I was just talking to a founder this morning who was, forgot what he's doing. He was like focusing on like doing a rebrand for his site. And I'm like, dude, you're doing like 1 million a year. Like and I was like, when was the last time you launched new creative on Facebook? You know what I mean? He's like, oh, like 2 months ago. I'm like, yeah, maybe you should just be like, just do creative, make your product better. But yeah, your site works fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like no one's going to not buy from your site.
Not hard to buy something online.
Yeah, it's not, again, like Taylor Holiday said, it's not hard to buy something online. So it's like, if me and Ben had that in 2016, I think we would basically probably be 5-10x what we are now. So it's really kind of enjoyable to build a community that can kind of like recycle that kind of experience back and hopefully help some people early days, as well as save some people from like, you know, expensive mistakes even now.
You know, Sam, the irony about building Workspace 6 is like the first product built for us where we're the customer is free.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You don't want to charge for it. Because, I mean, we get so much value just having these people, you know, in the Slack group. So, but yeah.
Well, like, even the fact that like, you know, we were in this, like, we created this group and talking to some other people about Facebook ads gave us the confidence to basically be like, you know what, we're going to do it ourselves. And frankly, our ads have never been more successful. And we're spending even less time than we were when we had agencies or contractors. Not to say that they weren't good contractors or agencies. They were great, but just like they wasn't a good fit for our scale, you know what I mean? Or maybe our business. But like, I think in one change on Facebook, we're spending 2 to 3 times more than we were before, and we're spending less time on it, and we shaved off, how much did we save in? Like $150,000 a year off of that agency that we removed for Facebook?
Oh, yeah. Just in like, agency fees. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like all basically went back to the businesses, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep. All right. Last question then. I think both of you, what do you love most about what you're doing right now?
I think I'm getting a lot of joy out of building a team for our fulfillment company. So I touched on it briefly before, but Sam and I launched a 3PL last October based off of like pretty much everything that we knew in fulfillment, and we've taken a brand to another 3PL, had a horrible experience. So we really wanted to build this as like a 3PL that was created by founders, where we know what the problem is, you know, and where 3PLs fall short. It's a very simple business. It's like, you know, why is everyone having such a headache, you know? And it comes down to basically 3PLs competing on price and founders basically putting that at the top of their list. Sam and I look at it differently because you kind of get what you pay for. And when you treat like a 3PL as just a place you store your stuff and not as a partner, which is, you know, they're one of the most important partners you have. You know, if you can't get your product to the customer on time, what kind of brand do you have, you know? So there's a lot of that going on. And so when you pay, you know, when you go for the cheapest 3PL, you're getting that level of service. So Sam and I wanted to kind of take it to the next level, where we wanted to simplify everything. We really want to invest in the success of our clients. So like we're selective on who we bring on for that reason, because we want to work with people that we like working with. And that's kind of been a theme through our whole journey. Is like, we want to work with friends. We want to, like, you know, we want to build businesses together. So in doing that, not only like getting to work with cool people and cool brands, you know, cool new founders, but also like building a team, not quite from scratch, but seeing like, you know, bringing in new people as the fulfillment side grows, and just kind of like propping them up and letting them make decisions in the warehouse. Like I don't go to our warehouse. Maybe I go to the warehouse every, you know, like other day or so for a few hours, but I really kind of let that run on its own. Our warehouse manager has been with us since 2014 or something like that. So he kind of knows the drill, and kind of like giving everyone more autonomy on making decisions, and kind of building this up with them. So it's cool to see. It's cool to see when like people are taking initiative, on that type of thing. And it can get working, behind a screen can get kind of lonely sometimes, because you're basically just seeing text on a screen all day, and you can especially if you're working remotely. So having that kind of human interaction is something that I enjoy for sure.
I think for me lately, it's been really rewarding building this community. And then just in general, the awesome connections I've been making through the community in general, like it's been a massive asset, just like having the level of knowledge basically at my fingertips now, for basically anything I'm working on. It's like being able to get kind of really invested in the community. If I have any questions now, whether it be, for Workspace 6 or for, any questions that basically might have about the fulfillment side or brand side, is basically just being able to literally post that, whether it be on social media now or from, within our own communities, and just having like basically top tier, top level knowledge basically just flow back to me has been just a massive, just basically asset, both super rewarding because I can learn things really quickly. And then just in general, being able to provide value back to people, like, wherever I can, has been pretty rewarding. We had another member recently, like, Ben, I don't know if you follow that one, but like basically his 3PL, he's a member of Workspace 6, his 3PL is basically threatened to not ship any of his goods and is holding his inventory hostage for $75,000. Basically because the only thing he's doing is he just wants to leave. And he gave him like 3 months notice, and like they basically are trying to charge him for losses, and it's not even within his contract. So like he jumps in the community asking, hey, is this normal? And he got 20 different founders jump in and be like, oh, I dealt with this a couple of years ago. Here's like a lawyer you can talk to. This is what my experience was. Some guys are like, yeah, you should just drive down and like basically talk to him. Bunch of people were like, you know what, like happy if you want to make a stink about this on social media, happy to reshare.
Oh, dude, I love that. Everyone's like, I'll hop in there, I'll comment, I'll repost.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, people like those like 20 people rallying around this guy, and like even at the end of the thread, he was just like, dude, I've never got this level of support from like other people before. It's just like I don't feel like I'm alone. And it's like it's like this is something that basically every founder deals with internally every day, where it's like interactions like this where they either they have an agency that they're kind of getting gouged by, not to say that basically the entire industry is predatory, but it can be very predatory to basically what is effectively like the main source of revenue or money for everyone. So yeah, just basically being able to kind of facilitate that has been pretty fucking rad.
It's awesome. Constant growth. That's one thing I love hanging out with you guys. It's always growth. It's always getting better. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for doing this. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's been awesome, Matt. We're a little bit awkward on camera. We're a little camera shy. So
No.
Meetings and stuff with our clients.
It's our first official interviews. Hope we nailed it.
You guys freaking nailed it.